Hi, I'm Peter J Rea. Welcome to my second floor lair. And you're getting tired of that expression. How do you like my Starbucks coffee mug? Pretty good. That means I'm a cool guy. Just remember when you're in the mall, if you're in public, carry your Starbucks coffee cup with the Starbucks logo so people can see it. Although I think it's on both sides. See, I keep repeating myself. I think I told that lame joke before. Anyway, sorry about that. It's one of my favorites. I seem to be apologizing all the time. How do you like the T-shirt I'm wearing? Philippines Nation of Champions. Yeah, we had these made. We did a lot of research. Our secretary, Lorene Delina, she researched great achievements by Filipinos over the years. And just to mention a few that are listed on this shirt, Arsenio Dodgy Laurel, who won the Macau Grand Prix Championship in 1962 and 1963. He was actually killed, I believe, the following year. He's the son of the president, Jose Laurel, of the Philippines, and he's the grandfather of the famous Laurel brothers, who are achieved a lot in baseball in the Philippines. Jay, Matt, Carlos, and Danny, and our son Tim played baseball with Carlos. Fine family. And then there's a number of beauty contest, international beauty contest winners, like including Gemma Cruz, Gloria Diaz, and Melanie Marquez, and others. And then Efren Bata-Reyes, who won the billiards championships, was a great billiards player. Paeng Nepomuceno, who is actually recognized as the greatest bowler in the world, in history. You know, bowling, when you throw the ball, you know, the bowling where you throw it and you put your fingers in it, the big bowling ball. Manny Pacquiao, he's not on this shirt, but a lot of great boxers in Philippine history. Like I call them the 4 Bs in the Filipinos have specialized in: boxing, billiards, bowling, and beauty contests. So anyway, again, today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books number 25. And I hope that if you'll watch this video, if you love reading books, that you'll maybe get to see a few books I talk about that you might consider. If you hate reading books and you don't read books at all, then you might change your mind a little bit. Maybe there'll be a crack in your strong belief against books, because books I believe, been one of the best things in my life. I've had a lot of satisfaction from reading books. Very interesting, learned a lot, very entertaining, and very empowering. So anyway, let's get this party started. Did I say it's Resalest Remarkable Books number 25? If I did, I'm sorry to repeat myself. As I said, I do that a lot. Today's first book is The Gambler by Fyodor Dostoevsky, published in 1866. Dostoevsky, along with Tolstoy, those are the two very famous Russian authors. And this is the story of a gambler. It's a very sad book, and the ugliness in the life of a compulsive gambler. And so this is a real problem. People get mixed up in this. They find excitement, and I think it stems from a whole, it's self-ruin really. People have been ruined by gambling. They lose all their money, and it stems from a false belief, that the idea that you can get something for nothing, that you can get money without working for it, basically. And I think that's really a false belief. We need to work. Laziness is a problem. I've definitely been lazy myself. So it's very sad. People get into this. Although some people, maybe they don't need the money. That's just the excitement. Pete Rose, it was tragic what he really ruined his life because of gambling. He was banned from baseball, got into gambling, and other people. And for him, it was mostly the excitement that he found from gambling. The next book is Catfish, My Life in Baseball by Jim Catfish Hunter with Armin Kataian, 1988. Catfish Hunter, I think, is one of the coolest baseball pitchers of all time. He was the ace on the staff of the Oakland A's when they won 3 championships, and then he was the first big free agent. And Cleveland Indians, we believe, were in the running to sign him. He ended up signing with the New York Yankees and won a couple World Series there. Made a lot of money, did real well. He's from North Carolina and a good guy. It was very sad. I remember when he got Lou Gehrig's disease. It's heartbreaking. I felt so sad about that this author came to see him, and he couldn't use his if you have Lou Gehrig's disease, your muscles atrophy, and and he could no longer use his arms, and he had a spider crawling up his leg, and he asked the author to knock that spider away. And then, and actually he died. He was out walking. He could still walk, and then he fell. But since his arms were no good, he couldn't use his arms. He cracked his head, and he died, which in a way was good. So if you have Lou Gehrig's disease, you just wither away. Your muscles wither away. Anyway, he was a good fella, really good guy from North Carolina. And he got this nickname, Catfish, from the owner, Charlie Finley, who said, you got to have a nickname. His name was just Jim Hunter. And then he heard something about him fishing for catfish as a boy. Now he said, you're going to be Catfish Hunter. And that's how it was. That he had these catfish in a bucket. And our son Tim was bathing growing up. He used to be in this bucket of water taking a bath. And I called him Catfish in a Bucket, kind of referring to Catfish Hunter. The next book is P.B., The Paul Brown Story by Paul Brown with Jack Clary, published in 1979. Paul Brown is the founder of the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. He founded 2 NFL teams. And actually, when you think about the Baltimore Ravens, which had been the Browns, you could say even 3 teams. Anyway, Paul Brown was an amazing fellow. He won championships in coaching high school football in Mansfield, Ohio, and then he won a championship in Ohio State college football. And the Cleveland Browns, he founded the Browns, and of the 8 championships, Paul Brown was the coach for 7 of those. And actually, he put together the team that won the last title in 1964. An incredible fellow, very innovative. He signed African American players, because he wanted to win. So he was a real pioneer in that. He signed Marion Motley and Bill Willis. He was a very innovative fellow, did real well. And he was fired in January 1963 by Art Modell, which was kind of definitely a dark day in Cleveland sports history. I wrote in my book diary that Paul Brown was the greatest person in the history of Cleveland sports. It's kind of sad that where the Cincinnati Bengals play, it's named Paul Brown Stadium, which is fine because he founded the Bengals. It's amazing. He got fired by the Browns. He took some time off, and then he came back. He founded a new team. Cincinnati Bengals, really something. Good man, very good man, Paul Brown. God bless Paul Brown. The next book is The Best of Trek, number 10, from the magazine for Star Trek fans, edited by Walter Irwin and G.B. Love, 1986. This is a Star Trek magazine, and I really got into all these guys. They're so entertaining and funny and dramatic. Good stories. Captain Kirk, James Tiberius Kirk, and Spock, the Vulcan, and it's funny how Spock and Dr. McCoy, they tend to feud, and McCoy'd call him that you green-blooded Vulcan, and Uhuru and Sulu and Scotty and so forth. A wonderful story. All these characters are so endearing to really the whole world. The next book is Women Who Love Too Much. When You Keep Wishing and Hoping He'll Change by Robin Norwood, published in 1985. This is one of the best books I ever read. Really an eye-opener. It talks about the condition of codependency, which not many people are familiar with. Everyone knows about alcoholism, people who develop that condition, which is very tragic and destructive, destroys everything, destroys a person's life, destroys his family life and everything, loses his job. But the thing is, and traditionally, alcoholics have been men, and then there would be women who would find themselves attracted to alcoholics. And this is what this book describes: women who, mostly women who they want to help a sick guy. They think, and the thing is, it's kind of complicated. They want to help, but they actually aren't helping. They're enabling, and they themselves are sick. Codependency is a real problem, and so it's kind of what it is they enjoy helping people. They're actually good people, but the thing is they need to feel superior to the person they're helping, and basically if the person gets well, they lose interest in them, which is very sad. So they kind of get into the drama of these sick relationships with the alcoholic who's maybe unpredictable and violent. They kind of get into this whole drama of that, and believing they're helping someone when actually they're not. So this is a real sickness. Codependency is a real illness that many women have gotten. So they found when the alcoholic goes to Alcoholics Anonymous and gets recovery, very often the marriage will break up because the guy gets well and she doesn't like him anymore. She doesn't attracted to him, so she's sick, and so they established Al-Anon, which is for the persons who are attached to the alcoholic, where they can recover, and they go to these Al-Anon meetings. So it's really wonderful because this is a real problem. Because if these people, they end up, it's very self-destructive because they get involved in these sick relationships where they're abused, and it's very unhealthy. There's a lot of, it's horrible. So this is kind of an unknown condition, and really mostly women have. And so anyway, I had no idea when I came across this. I thought it was fascinating, very interesting, very important book, wonderful book by Robin Norwood. The next book is Rosario Is Dead by Madge Gull Axelson, 1989. This is a very sad story. It deals with the issue of the sexual abuse of children in third world countries, specifically the Philippines, and where you have foreigners who come, who have money from Europe or North America or Australia, and they take advantage of poor children who are very poor, and who are maybe homeless and who are beggars, who are hungry, and they lure these children into their hotels with food and candy and money, and then they rape them, and they commit these sexual abuses against these children. And in this story, this is a true story of this girl who died because after she bled to death after being raped. It was said, and she was from Olongapo, Philippines. So this is a really horrible thing. These people, they're very sick people who get into this, and I think it goes back to pornography. When people get into pornography, is a really destructive thing, and then people become overly sexual, and then they want to have, then they get into these very, sex should be involved with, definitely with love and in marriage, and hopefully, and then these types of things are just really horrible. They're really hurting these children. They're innocent. Who would want to have sex with a child? These are sick, very sick people. It's terrible. It's a real problem. Very terrible. And so this author he got into a very unpleasant topic. But we should have the courage to face reality and solve these problems, because it's horrible that these children go through these experiences. The next book is Lincoln Reconsidered by David Donald, published in 1956. Of course, Abraham Lincoln's always an amazing person to read about. He's so inspiring, and he did the right thing, and he endured, kind of like very similar to George Washington. He got through the Civil War. Boy, what a horrendous experience, so much death and suffering. But he believed, and he helped end slavery in the United States, and he helped keep the United States one country. Such an important thing, and we need to keep that in mind, that our United States partly is a great country because we're one country. We're not 50 countries. You don't need a visa to go to Florida. And we did have that Civil War, but since then we haven't had wars between states. We have political problems. So Abraham Lincoln really just performed this incredible thing for our country, and really something. Hey Tim, the next book is The Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom, published in 1987. Yeah, this is a pretty good book. It's about the decline in American universities because of German philosophers, and the 1960s when radicals destroyed the American university. He's talking here about the influence of Karl Marx, I believe, when he talks about the German. You got something ringing on your laptop here. The influence of Karl Marx, who really questioned everything and had no respect for Western civilization, very much anti-capitalist, believed capitalism was evil, and him and I don't know, maybe Nietzsche, these other philosophers, and because what happened in the 1960s in the United States is because of radicals and these leftists and the revolutionaries, they had no respect, for the achievements of the past. So, and then it was like, they came up with the expression, a dead white man, that all these people who had been studied, of course, most of the great thinkers were men, European men, and then this was like a complete rejection of that, and so really, a turn, if the Renaissance was really a flowering of learning and knowledge in in the 1700s in Europe, then this was like the opposite. This was a step toward ignorance. Well, there were some good parts to it, trying to be open to learning from other parts of the world, Africa, Latin America, Asia, and so forth. But also, really a rejection of the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the great thinkers from Europe. And so this was really a tragic thing when people really turned away from a lot of wisdom and a lot of wonderful learning. The next book is Now Pitching, Bob Feller, by Bob Feller with Bill Gilbert. Yeah, this is a wonderful book about the greatest pitcher in the history of the Cleveland Indians, Rapid Robert Feller, who is from Van Meter, Iowa. And he did really something. His father built a baseball field on their farm in Iowa. And Feller was this tremendous fastball pitcher, did real well. And I think he missed 5 years and maybe 4 years due to military service in the Second World War. My father and I had dinner with Bob Feller, believe it or not, at a fantasy event that my sister Patricia sponsored, where we got to go to what was called Jacobs Field back then, now Progressive Field in Cleveland. You get to go on the field, and Feller was there. We had dinner. We had a real nice conversation. Nice fella. I think he died now. He was a good guy, and it was kind of sad. Actually, the sad part is his wife had a drinking problem or drinking and drug problem, and so he had a real situation on his hands because she couldn't take care of their children, and of course he was traveling and with the team. So that was a really sad thing that he went through. The next book is A Handful of Ashes, One Mother's Tragedy, by Victoria C.G. Greenleaf, M.D., M.S., published in 2001. Now the author, that's a pen name. That's not the real name of the author. I know the author. I'm friends with the author. I won't reveal her identity because she wants to remain anonymous. And this is a book about the author's experience, especially with her son, her oldest son, who actually I grew up with. They lived down the street from us. And anyway, it's an extremely well-written book. It's really something. I highly recommend it. And it captured the times, that I was my childhood, the 1960s, here in Rocky River, Ohio, United States. And she had a lot of trouble with her son. They had a very troubled relationship. I think it was also connected to her relationship with her father, which led to difficulties with her and her. Her son was very strong-willed, and he developed problems with drinking, and so this is all about this relationship between a mother and a son. That's why it's called A Handful of Ashes. I guess she was kind of bitter about being a mother, and so there's a great scene where she talks. She described herself as swearing like a fisherman's wife. I thought that was pretty good. And another time she mentioned she and her husband were out traveling in Ohio, and then she wanted to go to a smorgasbord for a meal, and he just wanted to go home. So they had an argument in the car, and she described if they came home that if she had to cook, she'd be like a windmill, and she with her arms going from the cupboard to the stove to the refrigerator. I thought it was a very good analogy or comparison of herself to a windmill as cooking a meal. And so it's a very very readable book. It deals with the challenges of parenthood, of motherhood, and her marriage, and they had 2 other children. Very well written book. I highly recommend this book about the reality of family life and the perspective of this mother, and when she's trying to, she's wants the best for her kids. She wanted the best for them. She believed in education and learning and healthy things, science and nature and so forth. So it's really a good book. The next book is Cleveland, The Best Kept Secret, a colorful portrait of a great city by George E. Condon, published in 1967. Yeah, another book about Cleveland, Ohio, United States. Tom Johnson, for whom there's a statue. He's a seated statue at Public Square. They have pigeons like to sit on his head there. Cyrus Eaton, who made a lot of money and did a lot of philanthropy. John D. Rockefeller, the richest man in the world, from the Standard Oil Corporation. Originally, it was just his business was kerosene, then it was for heat, for lights, and then gasoline for cars. Bill Veeck, the Cleveland Indians owner, Paul Brown, the Van Sweringen brothers, who built the Terminal Tower. It's this beautiful building in Cleveland. So this is a fine book by George Condon. The next book is The Man in the Arena, The Life and Times of A.C. Sutphin by George Condon, 1995. Wonderful book. Al Sutphin is the father of Cleveland hockey. He was the guy who, he was the owner of the Barons. I think he started the Barons, and he built the Cleveland Arena 1937 in the midst of the Depression. And his Cleveland Barons hockey teams won 9 championships in the American Hockey League. And really something. You know, back then, back in the 40s and 50s, Cleveland was really a hockey town. The Cleveland Barons everyone was so excited about them. They did really well. And the arena only had, I think, 12,000 seats. But back then, you know, they did so well. And then he kind of lost interest in the Barons as he got older. And I remember he talking to Johnny Bauer, who was a goalie, and he said, "The bloom's off the rose, Johnny." He kind of lost interest. And then he could have... there were 2 hockey leagues. There was the NHL and the AHL, and Barons were in the AHL. He could have joined the NHL, but he thought it would sort of doom the AHL, so he was loyal. And those 2 leagues were on par with each other. They're pretty similar. But then, eventually, by the 60s, 70s, the NHL zoomed way ahead and became really the dominant league. And now the AHL is a minor league league. But anyway, Al Sutphin was a wonderful man, did so much for Cleveland as owner of the Cleveland Barons. The next book is My Story by Tom L. Johnson, published in 1911. Yeah, this is really something. A tremendous book, a tremendous man. Tom Johnson is probably the best mayor in the history of Cleveland. You know, he was really a mayor for everyone. You know, back then there was this really... you could say the United States was like a third world country, and Cleveland was like a third world city. You know, you had great wealth and horrible poverty, and Johnson was a mayor for everyone. You know, he really served the public. He just wasn't serving some very rich people, and he did a lot to change things in Cleveland. I know he worked for affordable public transportation and things like that. So he was really. Yeah, like I said, I wish I could give you more details of the things he did. He died fairly young. He was under a lot of pressure. He came from a rich family, and he kind of turned his back on them and really served the public and paid a price because he got a lot of pressure. He was under a lot of pressure from some very wealthy people in Cleveland, and he died relatively young, and they had a huge funeral for him. So that statue in public there is very fitting. And he should be remembered more in Cleveland. Tom Johnson, the greatest mayor in the history of Cleveland. The next book is Tribe Memories, the First Century by Russell Schneider, published in 2000. Yeah, he's talking, Russell Schneider, the great writer for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, sports writer, talks about guys like Gaylord Perry, who was my favorite pitcher back in the 70s, Buddy Bell, who was a good guy, played third base. It was too bad they traded him to Texas for Toby Harrah, because that was a bad trade. Charlie Spikes, who the guy I was my first big hero for the Indians, and he put on weight, and I kind of felt bad. His career went into decline. George Hendricks, another guy we traded, should have kept him. He helped St. Louis. He had power. Rico Cardi from the Dominican Republic. That's partly why I got interested in that country, in the Caribbean. Really a charismatic fellow, could hit. He couldn't run very much. His knees were real bad. And Frank Robinson, who was the first African-American player, African-American manager in Major League Baseball, 1975. And my friend Rick Donaldson and his father, Richard Donaldson, they were at the game when Robinson put himself in the lineup as a player-manager. He was a player, played that year, and he batted second. He hit a home run in his first at-bat in those all-red uniforms, and really something. That was really a historical event. The next book is Tom Landry. No, I'm sorry. The next book is Cleveland Stadium, The Last Chapter by James A. Toman and Gregory S. Deegan. Gregory G. Deegan, 1997. Well, yeah, Cleveland Municipal Stadium. This is the stadium's last chapter would be the final years. The Indians had played their last season in 1993. The Cleveland Indians. They moved to their new stadium Jacobs Field, later renamed Progressive Field. And so there was no baseball. And then and the Browns continued to play. 1995 was their last year where they moved to Baltimore. And then so that was the end for Cleveland Municipal Stadium. It was torn down. On the same site they built what they call Cleveland Browns Stadium, and it's now called First Energy Stadium. And I went to a lot of games with my father. Very fond memories of going to Gate A, and going to see the Indians play in the 1970s. And my dad was so patient. He took me to so many games. He'd come home from work. I said, Dad, let's go to a game, the Indians game. And he never said no. So I really give my dad a lot of credit. He'd been working hard all day, and he'd change his clothes, and he'd been working downtown. We'd head back downtown in the car. The next book is Indians Baseball, 100 Years of Memories, the official 100th anniversary book of the Cleveland Indians, 2000. My sister Patricia gave me this book for Christmas. Talks about guys like Cy Young, who was the Cy Young Award winners named after the top pitchers in each league each year. Napoleon Lajoie, who was actually for a while the Indians were called the Naps. They were named after him because he was the player manager, tremendous player early in the century. And if you want, there's this movie about Ty Cobb where he talks about Napoleon Lajoie. Tris Speaker, who was the player manager in 1920 when the Cleveland Indians won the World Series. He was a center fielder and played also the manager. And sometimes he'd run in from center, try to get a pickoff move on a guy on second. Earl Averill was my father's hero growing up. Lou Boudreau, Herb Score, who was a long-time, actually, Indians announcer after his playing career ended. Rocky Colavito, he was a real popular player in the late 50s. Sam McDowell, tremendous pitcher in the 60s. Gaylord Perry, Jim Thome was my son's favorite player. Carlos Baer, a guy I really liked. All these fellas, and so many more guys over the years who played baseball professionally here in Cleveland. The next book is Tom Landry, an autobiography by Tom Landry with Greg Lewis, published in 1990. Tom Landry was the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys for 29 years. And he had, I think he had been an assistant coach with Paul Brown. And he had a lot of success. I know he won championships with the Dallas Cowboys. He had that Roger Staubach was his quarterback, and these other fellas. That's a long run. 29 years as a head coach in the NFL. Just imagine. He was a good fellow. He wore a suit and tie at games, and he was a real straight shooter. Good fellow. Did well. Traditional fellow. Good man. Tom Landry. They had all those great teams. Preston Pearson, running back, and we're back in the 70s. The next book is Remembering SVD Missionaries Who Have Gone Before by Father Stan Plutz, 2001. My friend Father Stan Plutz was this Roman Catholic priest in the Philippines, wrote this book about men from his order, the Society for the Divine Word. And he wrote about these the men who had come to the Philippines and had died. I think mostly, European and American. Some Filipinos. Of course, now they're mostly Filipinos. And did a good job in paying respects to these fellows who had come, who had served God and served humanity. These are fellows from 1910 to 1977. God bless Stan Plutz. He's such a good man, good friend of mine. It appears that we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find a good book to read. God bless the Philippines, America, and the whole world. Live long and prosper. May the force be with you. God bless you. See you next time.